I want to give a shout out to Michael, who's leading our camera crew, who's been doing a terrific job under very difficult circumstances. And we finally got the audio working, and everything is great. So thank you. So I'm very excited about this this next session. We've worked right up until the last minute, and normally that's not a good thing, but in this case it is a very good thing. We've been talking a lot about how equipment, precinct equipment, voting tallying devices, DREs, ballot marking devices, and so on, are subject to tampering. You know, even the latest ones, we don't know how to assure that they can't be tampered with, and that in fact this can be done in a practical way. And so we are very excited to present some new work that actually had its genesis in last year's voting village, when we got the first sample in the wild of a new machine that's out there and deployed in multiple states. And 15 minutes after Drew looked at it, it just kind of fell over. And then we essentially had brought some other work together and found a kind of new class of attack that's much simpler to carry out than previously understood. So it's my great pleasure to introduce friend of the village and longtime contributor, Drew Springall, who's a professor at Auburn and voting machine hacker. Raise your hand. Is wearing the shirt that we don't give to just anybody for hacking a voting machine. A newcomer to the village, Philip Davis, who is his collaborator, and Marilyn Marks, another longtime friend of the village, who put them together. And there are also other people involved in this who you will hear about. This talk is going to end at lunch. It may spill over a little bit into Q&A time, but then they are going to move into the other room and do a kind of close-up demo and explain some more of the technical details afterward during the lunch break. So, if you find this interesting, you're not obligated. We won't force you to stay here, but you'll all want to go into the other room and forego lunch and enjoy some of the technical details. So please warmly welcome Drew, Philip, and Marilyn.
Thank you, Matt, for the invitation and all the tolerance. We are trying to do something live here. One of the things that Drew insisted on was we're not going to ask the audience just to trust us. We'll just show you some slides. We're doing the demo live, and you all know how live demos can go. So anyway, I'm Marilyn Marks. I'm the Executive Director of Coalition for Good Governance. We are the organizing plaintiff. Yikes! No, that... Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna see if the clicker still works. Maybe not. It does? I don't think so.
I was just testing it.
Okay, well, but I think maybe that little spill. There we go. And Will, if you can make it into presentation mode. Okay, let me try one more time. Okay, great. Thank you. So we're about to recover from that. The curling case that I mentioned, we're the organizing plaintiff. We're suing the Secretary of State and state officials in Georgia, attempting to get the Dominion touchscreen system banned as unconstitutional. And so we've been spending many years on that. Much of this work kind of stems from there. Why would we want to get the ICXs, or ballot marking devices built by Dominion, banned? Because, as these experts will tell you today, those ballot marking devices, the touchscreens, like we have here live, cannot produce a trustworthy source record. I'm no computer scientist at all, but I do understand why democracy cannot tolerate electronic systems that are vulnerable to manipulation and election subversion. For 16 years, I've been advocating for secure, verifiable, transparent elections. And I've seen a lot of ugly things in those 16 years. But this that these guys are going to show you is the scariest thing that I have seen in those 16 years. They've proven that Georgia's Dominion system can be hacked in two devastating ways. One is hacking what the voter sees on the touchscreen display. I call that hacking the voter. They can also alter the vote using the touchscreens, or hacking the vote count. So we're going to show you two different prongs of attacks using this. You'll see us demonstrate how an attacker can change the choices seen on the touchscreen, say alter the party affiliation of a candidate, or remove the Libertarian candidate or the Green Party candidate, reducing the voters' choices, alter the meaning of a ballot question, all the things that will change a voter's decision, of which there will be no written record. That's why we call it hacking the voter. So, Philip Davis is a software engineer who had no real election experience at all, no exposure to a voting system. But about 18 months ago, working at home in Florida, he discovered and accessed Georgia's election databases from 5 counties. He stumbled on highly restricted files, and it took him only a small amount of time to get into the databases and recognize that he could change what was in the databases. These were not supposed to be online, they were, that he could change the databases with very little effort. He and I talked. We tried to get the voting system experts to look at this. They looked at it, and after a while, they were very alarmed. We tried to get reporters to write about it. They didn't want to do it. Many of them started down the path, and their editors spiked the stories because it was just too scary. We're hoping that that silence will end today. We hope that there are reporters here and activists here who will make sure that the story gets out there, particularly to election officials who need to stop using these kinds of machines. So Philip and Drew only met 3 weeks ago. And Drew had the equipment. Philip had this idea that the databases could be hacked. We met 3 weeks ago in Atlanta and proved out the concept. Drew is a longtime computer scientist, a professor at Auburn University. He was one of our experts in the curling case, and as Matt said, a longtime DEF CON Voting Village participant. He had court authorized access to the Dominion voting system, but under a highly restrictive agreement. He, along with Dr. Alex Halderman, created the report that many of you have read. They hacked the system from the bottom up, Philip from the top down. And they came to the same conclusions, just how hackable this system was. Now, we're going to focus on the database hacks, not what Drew proved in his work for the curling case, although he'll be available in the lab for questions about that in his extensive and scary report. So as I point out, they ended up in the same place. Drew's report online, you can find it. To put this in context, this type of equipment, the touchscreen equipment, is not really standard except for accessibility devices. Generally, people are voting on hand-marked paper ballots. 70% of the people across the nation, probably you, vote on a hand-marked paper ballot, but for accessibility reasons, in almost every polling place that is using the Dominion equipment, they're voting on touchscreens for accessibility. But and those machines produce a ballot with a QR code and then the human readable text for the selections. In Georgia and in statewide, 5 million voters, everyone who's got to vote in the polling place has to vote on that type of machine. There are other jurisdictions as well, Riverside County, California, Chicago, and some other jurisdictions that require this. And that's one of the things we were fighting, is the required use of ballot marking devices. So it is part of the Dominion suite. I don't have time to go into the details, but these ballot marking devices are programmed from the election management server, the central brain of the system, and then a ballot, as we looked at, is printed off. You'll see it in action here. Put in a scanner, tabulator, and then from the scanner tabulator, those results fed up manually to the EMS system for reporting on election night. Dominion system usage in about 30 states across the nation. The kinds of vulnerabilities we're going to show you here are going to be in virtually all of those Dominion systems across the nation. In Georgia alone, there are about 40,000 touchscreens. This is the type of unit that was really not designed with security of the voting system in mind. Instead, they're used for things like touchscreen application at McDonald's, where you're ordering your French fries or a milkshake. You know, so what if it records your milkshake wrong? You can have a redo or a refund. Doesn't work that way in voting for your president. No redos available. So these are a couple of pictures of the units in deployment in Georgia. And you'll see rooms absolutely full of this type of equipment. And as we think about how they can be manipulated, it is scalable. That's one thing that people don't understand, that these machines can be accessed. Think about after hours, perhaps a night janitor with access to scores of machines. And only, as you will see, with a few seconds in each machine, with a USB device to be able to alter what's shown to the voters, how the votes are recorded, and then what a ballot looks like when it is printed, where it's been altered. It's a mischief-ready system. So today's demonstration is focused on, again, the ICX database hack, not the tabulators or the scanners, which can also be hacked. But we are not going to be talking about that today. Drew is going to explain how all of this came together, what the security concerns mean in the real-world environment. He'll explain why an ICX cannot produce a voter verifiable ballot and why the result of the ICX is untrustworthy if it's used for conducting the election. Then Philip will show how he stumbled onto Georgia's election programming databases, figured out how to unlock them quickly, and then demonstrated the ease of modifying them in ways that will affect a live election. All with no funding, no insider access, no elections experience, and no authorization. All found through public domain. And as Matt said, we will adjourn after Q&A over to the lab, and you all can give us suggestions on what you want to see hacked, and maybe take home your own ballot with whatever idea you have for hack on it. Okay, thank you, Drew.
Yeah, so Matt talked about this just a little bit in his intro. But the ICX that we've got up here that we're going to be using today is actually the one that originated back in Michigan, that ended up somehow getting donated to Goodwill, made its way on eBay, and was bought by Hari Hershey. If you've been here a couple of years, it actually debuted. We opened it up, opened the case, and started playing with it 2 years ago. And when we started playing with it, everything looks totally normal with it. It's the right hardware, the SID variant. It's running Android for running the Democracy Suite 5.5, which is what Michigan used at the same time, or at the time, to run the right version of the ICX app itself. I need to talk quieter. But when it comes to this machine, you can think of this as just any old regular machine. We haven't gone and put malware in it. We haven't gone and messed with the hardware. We haven't gone and done anything of that nature. And that's a great possibility that we don't get a whole lot of the time in actual voting village or in academic world. But it's only half of the part, because it's the hardware. You still need the software, the definition, and all the things. Well, a couple of years ago, I was kind of surfing the internet looking for some stuff and ran across a listing on a third-party election services vendor for a famous names demonstration kit. This is a kit that is built for the ICX for people to go out and run mock elections for training, for practice, for not using in the real world. And so, being the good little consumer I am, pulled a credit, had a credit card, and what's the worst that can happen? I lose a little bit of money. And surprisingly, they emailed me back a couple of days, I think it was later, and after sending them my university ID that said faculty, Auburn University, shipped it to the house. And so obviously, that's a very, very useful component. At the time, we didn't have the ICX yet, but very, very useful by itself. And this ICX famous name demo kit comes with a whole bunch, everything you need to run this mock election. It comes with the actual election definition itself. What candidates, what races, how many you can pick, what the propositions are, everything like that. It also came with the poll worker card for that, and the pin on a printed out piece of paper. Now, this poll worker card is specific to this election. This is not something you can go and plug into any other running ICX and it wouldn't do anything useful. It also came with a tech card and the pin associated with it. This is something you can go and plug into other elections and access the actual administrative menus in terms of like dropping into the Android OS, in terms of doing all the very, very critical God mode type things. So once I figured that out, told the vendor about that this was up on the line, it came down. This is no longer publicly available, publicly listed, and it hasn't been for a very, very long time. But I still had that one kit, which allowed us, once we got the ICX, when we can put the two pieces together, we can do a whole mock election. We got a valid config, we got the valid software, we got the valid hardware, and it operates as a very, very useful stand-in that doesn't have all the court complications like a lot of other accesses do. And what comes out of this actual machine is what's called a QR code ballot. And it's got two very distinct parts. The first is what's called the summary text. It usually has some abbreviation for whatever the race is, and then the name or the choice or the option you selected or the write-in that you can sit there and look at before you put your ballot into the scanner. But this is only used for specific types of audits. When it comes to the actual scanners themselves, they're working off the QR code. And this is the only thing that scanner effectively parses, understands, recovers information from. And this QR code, the details, the technical specifics of how it works, what's interpreted is all public knowledge. It's out in the open. But for the purposes of today, don't worry about that too much. Just think about it in terms of two things. Number one, it does not contain names. Think of it as an index, think of it as a reference, think of it as some indirect pointer to a name, but it does not contain an actual name of the person of the selection. The other is that when Philip's going to show you these QR codes, kind of think of them like fingerprints. You've seen on, Law and Order or something like that, how they compare them back and forth. For the purpose of today, think of it that way. Pick a couple of pieces and between two QR codes, look and see if they match. It's not perfect, but it's a very, very quick, very fast way to actually determine whether or not those codes are matching for yourself. We'll obviously tell you, but you please check us, please validate everything we're doing. And so Philip's going to talk about how these hacks actually work and what they entail.
Thank you. My name is Philip Davis. I'm a software developer. One day I got very, very bored and decided I would investigate Georgia's elections and see how many double-counted ballots they had. Super stupid because I live in Florida. Never even been to Georgia. But Georgia had ballots available on zebra.com website. It's like FileZilla or something. You can download these images. 5 of them included a little bit too much on them. And those they included the SQL Server databases. And the databases had a database table. I just did a select on a single database table, and voila, I get AES encryption keys and HMAC in plain text. Don't take a picture. I changed 2 or 3 of the letters. But they're very available, and they're using symmetric encryption. So if anyone can encrypt something, then someone can decrypt something. Same with the HMAC key. It's symmetric. So anything they sign, I can sign. Makes it very simple for me. So I found an ICX touchscreen configuration file with Marilyn one day. We were on a Zoom call. She goes, hey, where's the ICX files? I says, I think they're in this folder. We decrypted it. Oh, it was a zip file. I decrypted the zip file. SQL Server-like database sitting there. Okay. Open up the SQL Server-like database. It's got ballots, choices, contests, election events, and the encryption keys again. Just in case you didn't get them the first time, they're in the election event table. You can get them a second time. You're good. All right? But the voting software is kind of a dumb software. It doesn't have any text built into it. It reads completely from this database. So if I modify that database, I change the election machine. Pretty simple. So there's a table called choice localized. Choice localized has HTML. That HTML is displayed on the ICX machine. I can futz with it. They don't check anything. They don't have a signature. They don't have a HMAC. I can change it all I want. They also have the printed text. What text is printed on that ballot? I can futz with that. They didn't do any signature checks. They didn't do HMAC. And so if you actually look at the screens here, you can see what the HTML looks like. Everett Dirksen in bold print, carriage return, small Republican. So I have complete control of the display. I do anything I want to with this silly thing. This took us less than 1 hour to build this screen once I finally touched an ICX machine for the first time in my life. Never even seen one of those things. Less than an hour. This table, this database table, gives me access to all the display text. They're in resource files. The printed ballot text that's going to be printed. Number of choices that you can pick and erase. Party affiliations, I can completely disable a candidate. Just remove them off the ballot. The order that the candidate's coming up. So we have 2 concepts, and Marilyn said. This is called hacking the voter. We're going to change what you vote for without any record of this happening. So I can take a party affiliation. It's just HTML text, right? Charles Curtis is a Democrat. I just changed the HTML from Democrat to Green Party. No one votes for Green Party. So you're not going to vote for Charles Curtis. So you're probably going to pick a different person, even if you came there to vote for this person. We can change how many choices you have. For this Board of Education in the demo, you had 2 choices. Booker T and Albert Einstein. Once again, that's just HTML. I changed the 2 to a 1. What's going to happen when I do that? It's likely that one candidate will lose out on his vote. He's not going to see his vote anymore. All right? I can then hack the voter by asking a different question. This is one of my favorites. I have a question up there. Shall the consumption of marijuana be made legal in the state? Well, I don't want it to be legal. So what can I do? I can change the question. I can make it illegal in the state. And instead of the question on the screen saying, should it be made legal, made illegal in the state. Now you're going to vote the opposite of what you were thinking about voting. And not only that, the voter will be the opposite of his intent, and the printed ballot doesn't print the question. All it says is Proposition 1, yes or no. So when it says yes or no, you look at the ballot, it says what you want it to say, but it's the opposite of what your intent was. So we're going to do a live demonstration of that with Will. So what Will's going to do is he's going to open up this folder. This is that zip folder I was telling you about. It's got audio, text, images, and election data. Inside the election data is just a SQL database file. Good. Double click. Yep, there it is. That was that symbol. So now we have all these tables here, and anything that says localized was a table that they used to localize the languages. So he's going to right-click, browse that, and you can see here's the values. So he's going to take a look at that, show the consumption of marijuana. He's going to raise the font so we can see a little bit better. Thank you. But show the consumption of marijuana be legal or illegal. And all he's having to do is put IL in the legal thing. That's it. He's hacked your vote. That's it. So now that he's done, those keys are symmetric. All right, fine. I'm going to recompress that folder. Re-encrypt the folder, no HMAC, they didn't use it. And now he's going to create a file called demo2, or demo1 apparently. And it's going to be compressed back into a data file. This data file can be shared amongst other computers. It can be put back up on FileZilla where someone else downloads it. You can go back to the election data. But now you have this file. I'm going to copy it to a mem stick. And then he's going to actually use the machine as it was intended. So this part's actually not a hack. People are saying, don't call this hack. This is a repurposing of how the machine works. So this is a user, a technician, that's going to be actually installing it. Drew?
Yeah, so in order to actually load the configuration onto the ICX, that requires the technician card. Like I said, that's kind of the God mode, administrator access, highest level inside of that ICX app. But with the, one of the things with having this available, being able to buy it, was we could load it in the real ICX app. We didn't have to use any of the, clone techniques or the forge techniques that, Professor Halderman and I worked on. We're just using the real tech card itself. And once it's loaded, then we can use the poll worker card to actually decrypt and uncompress that zip file so that it can be used, so that SQL database is available to the actual ICX app itself. Because that smart card, that poll worker smart card, has the ability, or contains the actual AES key, the AES IV, the HMAC secret, and a couple other things. That's how the ICX is able to actually connect in and, do we plug it in? Welcome to live demos.
It's on. It's on. Let's plug in.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. So, that's how the ICX app can actually use it, is by pulling those keys off of the poll worker card, decrypting it locally, and then when you insert the voter card, it reads the voter card, what ballot style, what choices, things like that. In this case, there's only one ballot style, but it's very simple. And then the voter can actually go through and vote the actual selections they want.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. So as you can see, we're going to give a full demonstration of how this normally works, because most people have not seen it in action, nor have I, until a couple weeks ago. But this first one for senator, we got Everett Dirksen, is a Republican. Charles Curtis, lost directory apparently. There we go. So we got Everett Dirksen. We're going to pick him as a Republican. Thank you. We're going to have a representative. Go ahead and pick some. Florence Nightingale, Republican. And here's our choices of more than one. Thank you. And here, take a look at the question now. That's not what the state wanted it to say. Shall the consumption of marijuana be made illegal in the state? Unfortunately, the AI thing popped up on it. But, and now, so you're going to vote the opposite of what you wanted to vote for. Now you can go to review the ballot. And what does the review say? The review says, it has the question, still says illegal, all right? So it says yes. So now we're going to print the ballot and see what the ballot says. So basically what we've done is we hacked what you wanted to do. Your intent is not here. The ballot only says, Proposition A, vote for yes. The question is not recorded. It's only on the display that can be reverted at any point. And now you have influenced all the people that were going to vote for it to vote no, and all the ones for no to be yes. It changed it. All right, for the next demo, we'll get a little bit more crazy here. Switch screens. Thank you. You'll probably just have to run back through them until you get there. Is that it? Ready? Okay, super. We're going to hack the vote count. We've hacked you already. Now it's time to change the ballots. All right? Whoops, this way, that way. There it goes. Hacking the vote count means we're going to change what the ballot says. So instead of Dirksen and Curtis, all we're doing is copy paste, swap them around. And it's going to now say, sorry, we went one too many. Where's this pointing at? There it goes. So we're just going to swap the names on the ballot. It says instead of Everson Dirksen on the top, you're going to be voting for the opposite. So if you hit Charles Curtis now, you're actually making a vote for Emmett. Because remember what he was saying about the QR codes? It's just an index, just position. It just says you voted for the first person. That's all that's in the QR code. It doesn't matter what I displayed. And on the printout, both the printout and the display are in the resource files. So instead of Everett Dirksen, it's going to now say Charles Curtis. But did you see the QR change? QR code did not change. The QR code still has Everett Dirksen, even though the ballot says Charles Curtis. And when it's read into the tabulators, that's who's going to get the vote, is Emmett. No matter who you voted for, it's going to vote the opposite. Just think of all the things you could do if you had complete control of the display, of the printing, everything. These are just things we thought of one weekend. You know, imagine if you actually gave it some time and thought. There's a lot more tables out there. I can disable, enable, contest, races, add person to a ballot, remove them from a ballot, whatever I want. It will show you more after the demo. Okay, this last one, he's going to actually do the ballot swap. He's going to print the ballot and show you the votes are swapped, QR code, exactly the same. Oops, a little blurry. It did not help. But here you go. Charles Curtis, the Democrat, is going to be shown first, but the only thing that's recorded is that you pressed the first button, not who you pressed. Charles Curtis, Democrat, clicked it. We're going to print, cast your ballot. And what do we see? There you go. It still says what you think it should say, not the QR code. Thanks.
And so with these types of hacks, changing the configuration, that affects that ICX itself. And it's important to understand what the actual bounds of this are in terms of what it can do, what it can't do, things like that. When you really pull this apart, the way the actual requirements for it, there's kind of 4 generic ones. Number 1, understand the election definition, how it's laid out, what fields are where, what's references what other fields. And what Philip just showed you, that's pretty simple with just publicly available data, so we're going to ignore that from here on out. The second one is you have to obtain that AES key and IV. The third, you have to obtain the unmodified version of the ICX, of the election definition. And the fourth, you have to replace that election definition after you've modified it somehow. Now, for Voting Village, for doing these demos, how we did that's really straightforward. We had the famous names demo kit, we control the ICX, we were given the smart card in the pen, or the, poll worker card in the pen. And we can all kind of admit that's really boring. It's kind of doing it ourselves for the purpose of demonstration. What everyone always loves to ask, likes to ask is this, applying that same idea, applying that same concept to the real world. And unfortunately, if you stop and think about it, a lot of it's very, very similar to what we did, except you just replace a couple of words with poll worker. A poll worker is given their poll worker card that has the AES key, AES IV. A poll worker is given that election definition directly or indirectly. A poll worker controls what's on that ICX by nature of having semi-private access to it. They're in the polling booth before and after voting. And so when it comes to insider type attacks, they just play the role of us and do the exact same things. And people are going to come up after and ask a million different questions about what about if this, what about if that, what about if this other thing, which is understandable and reasonable. But think of it, remember that these are very, very, very generic requirements. The AES key and IV are on the county EMS server. They're on every poll worker card in that county. They're on every ICX in that county, like Philip showed you. There's a lot of opportunities of how you can fulfill that requirement. The unmodified election definition, same thing. It's on the county EMS server. It's on the USBs that are used to configure the ICXs before Election Day. They're on every ICX being used in a polling place. And when it comes to modifying that, or replacing with the modified definition, that's where we start getting into this idea of scalability. And these types of hacks, these types of changes to the definition are kind of the epitome of this idea. There's a whole bunch of knobs you can turn, a whole bunch of trade-offs that can be made. You can trade difficulty for scale. You can trade impact for probability. You can trade risk for likelihood. But those are all choices that are up to the actual attacker themselves. Because think of all the places that definition could get replaced, whether it's in transit, whether it's in storage, whether it's the night before when it's sitting in the local school gym before Election Day. They're all opportunities. And so, if this were to happen, theoretically somehow, well, what could we do about it? And this is analogous, very similar to two recent incidents, the Antrim County, Michigan, and the DeKalb County, Georgia, where a misconfigured election definition caused votes to go to the wrong candidate. But in those cases, those were, first off, universal misconfigurations. Every ICX had that incorrect definition. But they're also predictable misconfigurations. They only affected a specific set of ballot styles in a specific set of locations. And so going back and remapping those votes to the expected voter intent candidate, I'm not going to say it's simple, but it's a understandable process of, votes for Alice now go to Bob, votes that got dropped now go to Bob, and shifting that way. That's not what these are. These are very, very different because the attacker controls what those trade-offs are. Think of something like the vote for one change in the text. Well, how many people intended to overvote regardless of what the text said? How many people saw the text as being changed? How many machines was it changed on? Because it doesn't have to be all of them. How many, and even with all those things, how many people only undervoted because of that change in the wording? Thinking about the marijuana legally illegal question, same thing. How many machines did that get changed on? How many people even read the question or just knew that Prop 1, they were going to vote yes? How many people changed their vote based on that? There are all these questions, all these unknowns that complicate it compared to the universal, predictable misconfigurations that we saw in Antrim County and DeKalb County. And so, when it comes to the actual security root causes, why is this a thing that could happen? There's a whole bunch of them. Philip talked a couple of times about not a signed election definition. We could talk about, the database didn't do cross-compatibility checks. We could talk about a whole bunch of these very, very particular direct causes for it. But unfortunately, if we step back a little bit and think about these actual, what's going on inside the software, inside the architecture, a lot of these are unintended uses of intended behavior. When the vendor made that decision to split on-screen text from the text that's printed, that was a choice. When the vendor chose to use symmetric encryption instead of asymmetric encryption, or symmetric secrets instead of asymmetric secrets, that was a choice. When the vendor chose to use one universal set of cryptographic secrets across all the machines in that county, in that precinct, in that location, that was a choice. And so a lot of these design choices, a lot of these architecture choices are kind of the root cause. Now, I'm sure there's reasons that they were made, but from a pure security perspective, those seem like poor security decisions. So, thinking back about how this can be applied elsewhere, we've got VBSG 2.0 coming up. It's a great time to make some better choices. A lot of vendors are going back and re-implementing from a baseline so we can make better architecture choices.
Solution is simple. Hand-marked paper ballots, counted by tabulators, and then risk-limiting audits to make sure that the outcomes are correct. Let's jump really quickly to a few questions and answers. As we say, we will continue over in the lab with more details. Sorry, we're running long, but let's take a few questions if we've got time to do it.
And please ask your question in the form of a question.
Yes, can we get the microphone over here? It said over here, but it doesn't matter. Just either way.
Hello? Yeah. So I just wanted to confirm on the poll workers, you do need the tech card and the poll worker card to do the trick?
To do it the way that we just did it today, yes.
Okay.
Because you need the tech card to load the configuration, you need the poll worker card to decrypt it.
Okay, so
Now, if it's keyed alike, you could only need the technician and let the poll worker do it.
gotcha. I was just wanting to make sure.
Do you know anything about state-level policies for how frequently the AES key gets changed? Is it per county, per election necessarily, or it just happens when people decide to change it? I mean, I'm kind of wondering, what's the time window for implementing this? Do you, have a lot of time to get the AES key and then a little time to get the definition file? Or, yeah?
I don't know. I don't have a direct answer. My guesstimation would be order weeks. But it would depend on a lot of things. Like Georgia has a couple of, 3 weeks of early voting so they have to have that set up, ready to go many weeks in ahead. Other states I'm thinking of, they do their LNA testing many weeks in advance. but I can't give you an actual number.
Let's go to you.
Do you know, or where do you think the original election database that you found online came from? Was that exfiltrated and uploaded by a threat actor, or would
Oh, no.
a poll worker have uploaded that, or?
Now, this was an open records request by a voting rights group. They sent a whole bunch of requests. They got a lot of responses. Matter of fact, the first two counties were Appling and Bibb, and they both had databases. I actually thought it was a common thing that counties did.
At least that's what is stated, is that they came from open records requests.
Okay.
We do not have proof of that.
We do have quite a few open records requests.
Yes, but
So we know there's enormous interest in this. Fortunately, they're going to move into the other room and do a close-up live demo and are available for questions. Please join me in thanking this wonderful group.